Imagine finding out, at 8 months pregnant with a bruise on your cheek and divorce papers in your hand, that one of the wealthiest men in America is your brother, and that your husband knew it before he ever asked you on a date. Sarah Wheeler thought she was just another betrayed wife, cheating husband, messy divorce, painful, yes, but ordinary.
Then a waiter handed her his business card. Blackstone Holdings. Marcus Blackstone, Chief Executive Officer. Forbes magazine listed him as the 38th richest person in America. $4.2 billion, and he had her mother's jawline and her own green eyes. He said 7 words that shattered everything she thought she knew about herself. I am your brother. I've been looking for you. But the truth went even darker than a secret family reunion. Because if Marcus was her brother, then Sarah was an heir. And heirs in the Blackstone world had a very dangerous habit of dying young.
You can never truly know your own worth until someone tries to steal it from you. Your identity, your family, your voice, these are worth fighting for. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. I read every single one. And subscribe, because the stories we share here are about real strength, and you deserve more of that in your feed.
The silence felt like it lasted forever. Then the whispering began. Sarah knew in that moment her life had just shattered in front of everyone. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A waiter was standing beside her. He was tall, with dark hair and kind green eyes that looked strangely familiar. His warm voice made her want to burst into tears. "I am fine," she mumbled, even though she clearly was not. The waiter looked at Richard with pure disgust. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private matter," Richard snapped, but his voice had lost its power. "Not anymore," the waiter said, his tone calm but firm. "Security is on the way. You can leave on your own, or they can help you." Richard looked around and finally saw that every person in the restaurant was staring at him. His perfect image was destroyed. "This is not over, Sarah," he said as he stood up. He threw his napkin on the table and walked out, leaving her alone with 50 strangers. The waiter's presence was a small comfort. "Can I get you some ice for that?" he asked gently. Sarah just nodded, unable to speak. As he walked away, she did not trust her own voice to speak. But she saw something in the way he walked, a stride that was both confident and cautious. It was the walk of a man who moved through the world with purpose, but never drew attention to himself. When he came back with an ice pack wrapped in a cloth, he sat in Richard's empty chair without asking. He said, "I know this is bold, but you should not be alone right now. And you definitely should not drive." "I will call a cab," Sarah replied, taking the ice. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sarah Mitchell," she said. Then she corrected herself. "Well, Sarah Wheeler Mitchell, I guess. I am not sure what my name is anymore." At the name Wheeler, something changed in the waiter's expression. "Wheeler," he said slowly, "from Alabama." Sarah stared at him. "How did you know that? Your accent?" he said. Then he paused. "This might sound strange, but did you ever live in a town called Fairfield?" Now Sarah was truly on edge. "Who are you?" Instead of answering, he pulled a business card from his jacket. Sarah's world tilted. Blackstone Holdings, Marcus Blackstone, Chief Executive Officer. The name hit her like a punch. Blackstone. It was the same name from Richard's investigation file. The same name that had made her husband turn pale with fear. "I do not understand," Sarah whispered. Marcus Blackstone looked at her with those strangely familiar green eyes. His voice was gentle. "I think you do, Sarah. I think you have always felt that something was missing. You have spent your whole life feeling like a part of you was somewhere else." Sarah stared at the man, who was supposedly a billionaire, chief executive officer, but had just served her dinner. He knew her hometown, He knew her maiden name. He looked at her as if he had spent his entire life searching for her. "Who are you?" she asked again. "I am your brother," Marcus said simply. "And I have been looking for you for 25 years. 3 hours later, Sarah was in her empty penthouse, staring at the business card that had shattered her reality. The ice pack had melted, but the impossible claim from Marcus Blackstone had not. She had searched his name online the moment she got home. Forbes listed him as the 38th richest person in America, worth $4.2 billion. His empire spanned 3 continents. The photos showed a man with her green eyes and their mother's determined jawline. In every picture, she saw something guarded but hopeful in his expression. He looked like a man who had everything, but was still searching for one specific thing. Her laptop was open to a 2019 interview. He spoke about growing up in foster care in Alabama after his mother disappeared when he was 13. He said that he learned early that the people who are supposed to love you can leave without warning. But he also learned that love is not about blood. It is about choosing to show up for people. Sarah remembered being 17 when her mother died in a car accident. Her stepfather, Tom, had told her it was a sudden tragedy. 6 months later, they moved to New York. Tom legally changed her name from Sarah Blackstone Wheeler to Sarah Wheeler. He said it was for a fresh start. Now she wondered if he had other reasons. The apartment suddenly felt like a stage, and she had been playing a part she did not understand. Everything, from the furniture to the art, felt like a costume she needed to take off. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard that said, "We need to talk." She deleted it. Then she dialed the number on Marcus Blackstone's business card. He answered on the first ring. "Sarah, I need to ask you something," she said. "Do you remember a little girl who used to read under an oak tree behind a blue house on Maple Street?" There was a long silence. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You had a book about a princess who saved herself. You read it so many times the cover fell off." Sarah closed her eyes, the memory rushing back. She was 7 or 8 years old. An older boy would sometimes bring her lemonade and sit nearby while she read. Her mother called him her guardian angel. "That was you," she whispered. "That was me," he confirmed. "I was 15. I always checked on you after my shift at the grocery store. Mom said you were too little to understand why I could not live with you." "You are my brother." "Half-brother," Marcus corrected gently. "We have the same mother, but different fathers. My father was a violent man. Mom got us both away from him." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "Why did no one ever tell me?" "Because Mom made everyone promise to protect you from the truth," he explained. "She was terrified my father would find us and use you to hurt her. When she died, your stepfather honored that promise. Tom Wheeler is a good man, Sarah. He moved you across the country and changed your name because he was genuinely afraid for you. My father was in and out of prison my whole childhood. Mom did not want you to grow up in that shadow." Sarah thought about her stepfather, who had always been kind but distant. She had always thought his distance was from grief. Now she realized it might have been guilt. "Where is our father now?" Marcus's voice was steady. "He is serving life without parole for murder. He has been in prison for 8 years. The words were like ice water. He killed a man who threatened me. Ironic, since he was the biggest threat in my life for years. But that is a story for another time. The important thing is, he cannot hurt either of us now. How did my entire life fall apart in one day? This morning, I was an attorney's wife, and my biggest worry was postpartum depression. Tonight, I learned my husband is divorcing me because of a family I never knew I had, and my secret brother is one of the wealthiest men in America. Life really throws everything at you at once. The real question is, what are you going to do about it? I looked at the divorce papers, felt the bruises on my wrist from Richard's grip, and knew I had to fight. I need to understand what is happening to me. Marcus warned me the truth would be difficult. I told him nothing could be harder than finding out my whole life was a lie. He just said, "You would be surprised." When he asked to meet, I hesitated, afraid Richard would find out. Marcus's voice was firm. "Sarah, I have built this company for 15 years. If I cannot protect you from one bully of a lawyer, then I am not the man people think I am." For the first time, I felt like someone was truly on my side. "Okay," I said, "but I have a condition. I want the whole truth about our mom, your father, and why Richard is so terrified of the Blackstone name. No more protective lies." "Agreed," he said. "And I need to know what this means for my baby. I will not let my child be used as a pawn in Richard's games." "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice now gentle but firm, "I promise you, your child will grow up safe, loved, and free from our parents' mistakes. Family protects family." After we hung up, I thought about the woman I was this morning versus who I was becoming. It felt like shedding a skin that never really fit. I made some tea and opened my laptop. I searched for the connection between Richard's firm, Mitchell Industries, and Blackstone Holdings. What I found made me sick. There were years of legal attacks, patent challenges, and complaints filed against Blackstone. It was a pattern of systematic harassment, designed not to win, but to bleed my brother's company dry. Richard had not just known about Marcus. He had been waging a secret war against him for years. All those late nights and business trips were not for our future. He was trying to destroy my brother. The baby kicked, and I placed a hand on my stomach. "Do not worry, little one," I whispered. "Your Uncle Marcus is going to help us." And for once, that felt like a real promise. The next morning, a gray rain fell over Manhattan. I stood outside the Blackstone building on Fifth Avenue, looking up at 91 stories of glass and steel disappearing into the clouds. This was a world I was never supposed to be a part of. The lobby was grand and intimidating, designed to make you feel small. But when I gave my name at the security desk, the guard's professional manner turned to genuine warmth. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Blackstone asked me to personally escort you." The elevator ride to the top floor felt like an eternity, giving me time to think. I had spent all night reading about Marcus Blackstone. He was a ruthless and brilliant man who had built an empire. But underneath all the success, I sensed a deep loneliness. He often talked about giving people second chances. I realized he spent 15 years trying to save others because he could not save himself from the pain of losing his own family. The elevator doors opened into a reception area that felt more like a cozy library than a corporate office. A woman in her 50s, named Helen, greeted me warmly and said, Mr. Blackstone was waiting. His office took up the entire corner of the building, with breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. But the space felt personal and lived in, filled with family photos and a comfortable reading chair that was clearly used often. Marcus stood looking out at the park. When he turned, I was once again struck by how much his eyes looked like our mother's. "Thank you for coming," he said. I replied, "Thank you for telling me the truth, or at least some of it." He offered me coffee, but I had something else in mind. "Actually, I would like to start with this." I pulled out a small photograph I had found tucked away in my jewelry box. It showed a young woman with dark hair holding a toddler, while a slightly older boy stood beside them. "This is the only picture I have of our mother with both of us." Marcus took the photo, his hands shaking just a little. "I remember this day," he said softly. "Mom had just bought you that dress with the pink flowers. You wore it everywhere for a month straight. I do not remember the dress, I said, but I remember feeling safe. For a little while, we were a real family. I settled into a chair, my hands resting on my belly. Tell me what happened. Marcus was quiet for a moment, tracing the edge of the old photograph. Our father, Victor Blackstone, was a violent alcoholic. Mom tried to make it work, but by the time I was 10, she was planning our escape. She was going to take both of us and disappear. But Victor found out. My chest tightened. What did he do? He beat me so badly, I was in the hospital for a week. He told Mom that if she ever tried to leave with us, he would find us and kill all three of us. Victor did not see children to love. He saw property to control. The thought of Mom taking us away sent him into terrifying rages. I thought of Richard, with his cold threats and talk of custody. They saw women and children as possessions. So Mom made an impossible choice, I said quietly. She decided to save one of us rather than lose us both. She took you and ran, leaving me behind. She promised she would come back for me when it was safe, but it was never safe, was it? Marcus shook his head. Victor spent 2 years searching for you, hiring investigators, and offering rewards. Mom lived in constant fear that he would find you and make good on his threats. What finally changed? I did, Marcus said, his voice flat. When I turned 13, I was finally big enough to fight back. One night, Victor came home drunk and started on me, but this time I hit him back. I put him in the hospital. You were 13 years old? I was old enough to be tired of being scared. After that, Victor left me alone. But he became even more obsessed with finding you and Mom. He needed to prove that no one could take his property from him. He never found Mom. She was too careful. But he tracked down your stepfather, Tom Wheeler. Tom called Mom in a panic, saying someone was asking questions about you at school. My blood ran cold. What did Mom do? She made another impossible choice. She called Tom and told him to take you and run. She said to change your name, move across the country, and cut all ties. She knew that if Victor found you, he would use you to hurt her before killing you all. And Tom agreed? Tom really loved you, Sarah. Not in the twisted way our father did. He took you to New York, legally adopted you, and built a life where Victor Blackstone could never touch you. Tears welled in my eyes. What about you and Mom? We decided it was safest for me to go into foster care. Mom would stay hidden until Victor gave up, and then we would rebuild our family. But that day never came. Victor was in and out of prison for the next 4 years, always threatening to find you when he got out. I held my breath. And then, when you were 17, Mom died in a car accident. Sudden and tragic. You do not believe her death was an accident, do you? Marcus shook his head. I think Mom was exhausted from 5 years of hiding and looking over her shoulder. She was separated from both of her children. I think she was driving too fast in a storm because she was rushing to meet someone. That person claimed to have information about Victor, my father. I believe someone set her up. I have never been able to prove it, but her accident was just too convenient. You think our father had her killed? I think it is possible, Marcus said. He never admitted it, but he also never seemed surprised that she died. The baby kicked, and Sarah gasped. Marcus leaned forward. Are you okay? I am just processing the idea that my mother might have been murdered, she said. Sarah, I need you to understand, Marcus said, taking her hand. Victor cannot hurt you. He has no contact with the outside world. He does not know where you are or who you have become. You are safe. But Richard knows, she said. Richard knows the Blackstone name. And that, Marcus said, brings us to the question that has kept me up at night for 3 years. How does your husband know secrets about our family that took me a decade and a team of investigators to uncover? Sarah thought about Richard's threats and his strange confidence that he could control her. I think my marriage was never about love, she said slowly. I think it was always about getting access to something. Marcus opened a folder and showed her a document. My company has a unique rule, he explained. I made sure that any direct blood relative could claim a large part of the company if certain conditions were met. What kind of conditions? Marriage, children, and proof of a genetic relationship. It was my way of making sure that money could never separate my family the way poverty separated ours. A horrible understanding began to dawn on Sarah. Richard married me to get your money, through our child. Marcus nodded grimly. I think Richard married you because someone told him that marrying a Blackstone heir would be a very profitable investment. The question was simple, but the answer was terrifying. Who was feeding Richard information about her family and why? Sarah's mind raced. She thought about her life with Richard, how he showered her with money, but controlled everything else. He always insisted on handling all their finances and legal matters. He was playing the long game, she said out loud. For years, he had invested in a relationship he believed would make him incredibly rich. If Sarah had claimed her inheritance and then divorced him, the law would have handed him hundreds of millions of dollars. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. She had loved a man for 6 years who only saw her as a dollar sign. But what if he divorced me first, she wondered, before I knew about you? Marcus explained he could claim you hid assets during the marriage. He could even argue for a bigger settlement because of fraud. A wave of pure anger washed over Sarah. He was going to take her inheritance and her child, and then make her thank him for the scraps. That seems to have been his plan, Marcus said, his voice grim. Now we find out who is feeding Richard information, and we make sure anyone who tries to use a Blackstone for personal gain understands why that is a terrible idea. Sarah looked at her brother, seeing the tough 13-year-old boy who fought against impossible odds hidden inside the successful businessman. I want to help, she insisted. Sarah, you are 6 months pregnant and going through a divorce. You need to take care of yourself and your baby. This is my life they have been twisting, she shot back. It is my child they plan to use as a pawn. I am not sitting on the sidelines while other people decide my future. Marcus looked at her, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. You have Mom's eyes, he said softly, but you have her spine too. Okay, we do this together, but we do it smart, and we do it safe. What is the first step? She asked. First, we move you somewhere Richard cannot find you. I have a place that is secure, comfortable, and completely off the grid. I cannot just vanish, she argued. I have doctor's appointments. All of which can be managed with much better security, Marcus said, leaning forward, Sarah, I spent 25 years wondering what happened to my sister. I am not losing you now because we underestimated a desperate man. Sarah thought about Richard's threats and the cold, calculating look in his eyes. Okay, she finally agreed. But I want to understand everything. No more secrets to protect me. I want to know exactly what we are up against. Agreed, Marcus said. But first, I want you to meet someone who has been helping me search for you for years. She has some ideas about how Richard got his information. Who? A private investigator named Detective Maria Santos. She specializes in corporate spying and finding lost family members. And she believes your husband's connection to our family goes back much further than we thought. Just then, the office door opened. A woman in her 40s walked in, holding a thick file. She had an expression that said she was about to deliver bad news. Miss Mitchell, she said, we need to talk. Detective Santos had a presence that commanded respect. Her graying hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her eyes missed nothing. She sat down and opened her file carefully. Before we begin, she said to Sarah, I need to be clear. What I am about to tell you will change how you see everyone in your life. Are you sure you are ready for that? Sarah looked from Maria to Marcus. I do not think I have a choice anymore. There is always a choice, Maria replied. You could walk away, take Marcus's offer of financial security, and build a quiet new life. Many people would say that is the smart move. Would you? Maria offered a small, humorless smile. I have never been called smart, but I have been called thorough. She slid a photograph across the table. Do you recognize this man? Sarah looked down and felt her entire world spin. That is my stepfather, Tom Wheeler. The picture showed him standing outside Richard's office building just 3 weeks ago. The truth hit her like a punch to the stomach. Tom has been talking to Richard? More than talking, Maria confirmed. According to my sources, Tom Wheeler has been giving Richard detailed information about your family for over 2 years. Sarah stared at the photo, unable to connect the man who raised her with this level of betrayal. That is impossible. Tom protected me. He moved us to New York and changed my name. He did, Maria said, and he has been terrified ever since that he made the wrong decision. Tom has carried the guilt of your mother's death for 25 years, Maria explained. He blames himself for not protecting her, for taking you so far away that she died alone. He never said anything, Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. What could he say? Maria asked gently. That he wondered if Maria would still be alive if he had made different choices? She presented another document. 2 years ago, someone approached Tom with a proposition. Richard, Sarah guessed. Actually, no. Someone claiming to represent Richard's interests. They told Tom they had found Marcus and were working on a family reunion. They said they needed background information on you and your mother to make sure it was done safely. Marcus's face hardened. And Tom believed them? Tom wanted to believe them, Maria said. He had been following your career for years, Marcus, hoping for a safe way to reconnect you and your sister. When these people came to him, he saw it as a chance to finally make things right. So he told them everything, Sarah said, feeling a wave of nausea. Everything, Maria confirmed. Your new name, your location, your marriage. He thought he was helping to heal your family. Instead, he was just giving Richard ammunition to destroy us, Marcus said grimly. Maria added that it only got worse. After Tom started talking, these people kept coming back, asking about Sarah's mother's final days and Victor Blackstone's threats. When Sarah asked why they would care, Maria explained that Victor was still dangerous, running a criminal network from inside prison. His 2 sons from a first marriage were career criminals, waiting for 25 years to inherit the fortune he had hidden away. Sarah felt the baby kick as her heart began to pound. She learned this hidden money, which the FBI never found, came from years of organized crime. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then asked, How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimates, Maria said, are between $10 and $50 million, enough to make people very motivated to get rid of the competition. Sarah struggled to catch her breath. Competition like me and my baby? Maria confirmed that Richard was playing multiple angles. He planned to marry into the Blackstone family, gain access to Marcus's legitimate wealth, and then use his child's bloodline to claim a share of Victor's criminal assets. Sarah looked at Marcus, her own horror mirrored in his expression. The scope of it was overwhelming. She was up against Victor's sons, their outside help, Richard and his partners, and possibly other dangerous people Victor owed money to. She had thought she was dealing with a narcissistic husband having an affair. Instead, she was trapped in a criminal conspiracy that spanned generations, involving millions of dollars and people who had already proven they were willing to kill. And what about Tom? She asked quietly. Maria assured her that Tom was truly sorry and absolutely terrified. Once he understood what he had dragged you into, he tried to get out, but it was too late, Maria said. They have enough information to ruin his life. We have to help him, Sarah insisted. We will, Marcus promised. But first, we have to keep you safe. If Victor's sons find out Richard's plan is falling apart, they will look for more direct solutions. A look passed between Maria and Marcus, and Sarah knew there was something else. Marcus nodded to Maria. Show her the timeline. Maria pulled out a final document. It showed that her mother's car accident happened just 2 days after Victor's last appeal was denied. Richard had met Sarah exactly 6 months after Marcus's company went public. Her stepfather was approached right after Victor's sons were released from prison. You think this was all planned for years? Sarah whispered. Marcus's voice was cold. I think it has been planned since the day your mother died. They have been watching our family for decades, waiting for the right moment. The sheer scale of the deception was crushing Sarah. So everyone in my life, my husband, my stepfather, they have all been lying to me? Not everyone, Marcus said gently. Tom loved you, and now you have family who will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Maria explained the plan. Sarah would have to disappear. A new identity, a secure location, and 24-hour protection until the baby was born, and the threats were handled. It could take months, maybe longer. The idea of spending the rest of her pregnancy in hiding was both a relief and a prison. What if I do not want to disappear? She asked. What if I want to fight back? Then you put yourself and your baby at risk, Marcus said, bluntly. These people have already killed at least one person, Sarah. They will not hesitate to kill again. You really think they killed Mom? I think your mother's accident was awfully convenient for them, he replied. Sarah instinctively placed her hands on her belly. Imagine being pregnant and trapped, discovering that the man you are divorcing is trying to prove you are mentally unstable just to win. That was Sarah's new reality. The moment she felt her baby move, for the first time, she knew this fight was not just about her anymore. An innocent child's future was on the line. This is the story of how a woman cornered by lies decided to stop running and start fighting back. She told her brother Marcus, I will disappear, but I want a say in how this ends. I will not spend my life looking over my shoulder. Marcus saw a new fire in her eyes. Now you are talking like a Blackstone, he said with a smile. The safe house in the Hamptons was a golden cage. It was a massive estate with a private beach and a full staff. But after 3 weeks, Sarah felt like a prisoner. You are pacing again, Dr. Elizabeth Hartman noted during one of her visits. The doctor was there to monitor her pregnancy, but also to keep an eye on her state of mind. I am pregnant, not a fragile doll, Sarah shot back. And I am going crazy while everyone else runs my life. Dr. Hartman put down her chart. Your brother is protecting you. No, Sarah corrected. He is trying to manage a crisis that has been raging for 25 years. The doctor gently changed the subject. Tell me about the nightmares. Sarah had been having the same awful dream for weeks, always ending with her mother's car crashing in a storm. They are just stress dreams, she mumbled. Dr. Hartman explained that her mind was processing a lifetime of deception. She then asked a simple question that cut through everything. If you could write the ending to this story, what would it look like? Sarah thought for a moment. For months, she had only been reacting. Now, she had to decide what she wanted. I want my child to grow up free, she said, her voice firm, free from the fear that ruled my family. And what do you want for yourself, Sarah? Not as a mother or a sister, but just for you? The question stopped her cold. She had spent so long defined by others, especially the 6 years with a husband who only saw her as a tool. I want to matter, she whispered. I want to be valued for who I am. As she spoke, she looked around the beautiful prison Marcus had built. She knew she could not matter if she stayed hidden forever. At that moment, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. His voice was tight with tension. "Sarah, we need to talk. Can Dr. Hartman stay on the line?" Sarah put the call on speaker. "What is wrong?" Marcus did not waste time. "We know why Richard is so confident. He has been building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Marcus explained that Richard was twisting everything. Her anxiety about the pregnancy, her accusations about his affair, and her emotional reactions were all being documented as proof of paranoid and delusional thinking. He planned to argue that discovering her family history triggered a complete psychological breakdown, making her an unfit mother. "He is going to use my reaction to being slapped as proof that I am unstable," Sarah said, feeling sick. "It gets worse," Marcus continued. "He is painting me as a dangerous influence, and your decision to connect with me as a sign of poor judgment." Dr. Hartman grimly confirmed the danger. With the right spin, a judge could easily be convinced, granting Richard full custody of the baby and control of all their finances. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked, her hands shaking. "He filed the paperwork yesterday." "You have 30 days to respond." "I need to come back to the city," Sarah declared. Marcus immediately refused, saying it was too dangerous. But Sarah saw the trap. "It is more dangerous to look like I am hiding. If he says I am unstable, disappearing only proves his point." Dr. Hartman agreed. The isolation was not helping. Sarah had to show she was engaged and rational. "You do not understand how dangerous these people are," Marcus pleaded. "And you," Sarah replied, her voice filled with newfound strength, "do not understand how dangerous it is for a woman to let other people make all her decisions." After a long silence, Marcus asked, "What are you proposing?" "I am proposing we stop playing defense. Richard wants to use my family history against me? Fine. We will use it for me. We are going to take control of the story and tell it ourselves, publicly. It's too late to turn back now. At least this way, I get to tell my own story instead of letting someone else write it for me." Dr. Hartman gave me a reassuring smile. She believed I was making a strategic choice, not an emotional one. Marcus, my brother, was on the other end of the line. After a long pause, his voice came through, filled with a pride I had never heard before. "Okay, sister," he said, "let's go to war." Returning to Manhattan was like entering another reality. My name suddenly carried a weight I was still getting used to. The penthouse I'd shared with Richard was now what Marcus called a fortress with good lighting. A security team had installed reinforced doors and surveillance systems. They even added panic rooms that looked just like walk-in closets. "This seems like a bit much," I said, watching them test the new alarms. "This is necessary," Marcus replied, his eyes glued to a monitoring tablet. He told me that Victor's sons were tired of Richard's slow-moving plan. They wanted to get rid of the competition directly. I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling the baby move. At 7.5 months pregnant, it felt like I was carrying a basketball. "Have you heard from Richard?" I asked. "Every day," Marcus said with a dark look. "He plays the part of the worried husband, while his lawyers build a case that you're unstable." His team had collected statements from my old colleagues, medical records about my anxiety, and even stories from neighbors about my paranoid behavior. It was all easily explained by the fact that my husband was planning to leave me and take my inheritance. But Richard's lawyers were twisting it, blaming it all on pregnancy hormones and family trauma. The worst part was how believable he made it sound. "What do we have to fight back with?" I asked. Marcus explained that our investigator, Maria, had proof Richard had been planning this for years, but in family court, it could easily become a he said, she said situation. My pregnancy and family history would be used against me. Looking around the apartment that no longer felt like mine, an idea began to form. What if we don't wait for court? I said. What if we take this story public first? Marcus sat down, ready for one of his strategy sessions. Going public has its benefits, he admitted. First, we destroy Richard's claim that you're having a breakdown. You'll be lucid and rational. Second, we force Victor's sons out of the shadows. If the FBI starts investigating them publicly, they'll have to either back off or make a mistake. And third, we could protect other people from going through this in the future. A sense of purpose washed over me. I want to do it, I said. But I want to tell the whole story. This is about more than just Richard. It's about the cost of family secrets. It's about how many women are trapped by men like him because they don't have the support to fight back. Before Marcus could answer, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. Sarah, it's Tom. My stepfather's voice sounded weak and old. Hearing it brought a wave of love, anger, and sadness. He had raised me, but he had also betrayed me. Tom, where are you? Somewhere safe, I hope, he said. I need to see you. There are things I should have told you years ago. Things about your mother's last days and about the people who have been asking questions. I looked at Marcus, who was already alerting his security team. Tom, are you in danger? We all are, sweetheart, he whispered. Torn, I told him. Tom, I need you to know I forgive you for talking to Richard's people. I understand why you did it. There was a long silence. You always did see the best in people, he finally said. It's what made you a great teacher, but it also made you vulnerable, especially to people like Richard. What do you mean, people like Richard? I mean people who study you, Tom said, his voice trembling. Sarah, Richard didn't meet you by accident. He was hunting you. A chill spread through my body. Hunting me? How? He tracked you for months, Tom explained. He learned your schedule, your interests, your weaknesses. The people who contacted me showed me the photos, pictures of you going to work, to the grocery store, to your book club. They were watching you long before he ever said hello. The fairy tale romance was a lie. It had all been a calculated operation. Tom, where are you? I pleaded. We need to get you somewhere safe. I'm not sure anywhere is safe anymore, he said. They know I've been talking to you. They know I won't cooperate. Who is they? People who think your father's money belongs to them, he said. People who have been waiting 25 years to collect. The baby kicked hard, reacting to my fear. Tom, go to the nearest police station, I urged. Ask for protective custody. Tell them your life is in danger. Please, do it now. I can't lose you, too. The line went dead. As Marcus scrambled to locate Tom, my resolve hardened into steel. Marcus, I said, my voice clear and steady, how quickly can we arrange a press conference? He studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. How soon can you be ready? Was this the biggest mistake of her life, or the moment she finally took back her story? The press conference was set for Thursday, but by Wednesday night, Sarah was having serious doubts. Staring out at the city lights from her brother's office, she felt a wave of uncertainty. The media response is huge, Helen reported. CNN, NBC, all the major papers. This is going to be a big story. Anything from Richard? Sarah asked. His lawyer called 3 times, Marcus replied. He's politely asking you to reconsider. Translation, he is terrified. Just then, Maria Santos entered with a thick folder, her face grim. We have a problem, she announced. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The kind that makes tomorrow incredibly dangerous, Maria said, opening the folder. Maria spread several photographs across the desk. They showed unfamiliar men in dark cars, parked outside Blackstone properties, watching everyone. Surveillance, Marcus said grimly. Worse, Maria corrected him. 3 of these men have criminal records connected to Victor Blackstone's organization. They are not here to watch. They are here to send a message. What message? Sarah asked, feeling the baby kick as her anxiety spiked. The message is that your family has attracted attention from people who do not like publicity. Marcus was already on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones to his security team. He was no longer her brother. He was the billionaire executive who had built an empire. We have options, he said when he hung up. Swim. We postponed the press conference. But I won't show sunshine, Maria said immediately. Move Sarah back to the safe house and wait for law enforcement to clear the threats. No, Sarah protested. Meanwhile, Richard moves forward with his case and gets custody of my baby? Is it better for my child to grow up with a father who manipulated and abused me? Marcus and Maria exchanged a knowing glance. There is another option, Marcus said carefully. We move the press conference to a more secure location and we tell the complete story, not just about Richard, but about Victor's criminal organization and the threats against our family. Sarah felt something click into place. We drag them out of the shadows. Exactly, Marcus said. We put everything on the record, with federal law enforcement present. Any retaliation after that becomes a federal crime. Maria looked skeptical. That is incredibly risky. You are declaring war. They declared war on us 25 years ago, Marcus replied. We are just finally fighting back. Sarah thought of her mother, dying alone in a car crash that might not have been an accident. She thought of Tom, hiding because he tried to help her. She thought of the baby inside her, who deserved a legacy of strength, not fear. I want to do it, she said firmly. Already arranged, Marcus said. Maria has been coordinating with FBI agents who have been investigating Victor for years. They are very interested in cooperative witnesses. And Richard? Sarah asked. He becomes a footnote in a much bigger story. This is no longer about a messy divorce. It is about a woman who chose to fight back against organized crime. A strange calm settled over her. The only way out was straight through. To tell her story, Maria said, she had to sound like someone taking back control, not someone falling apart. She had to expose the manipulation without playing the victim. What if I am falling apart? Sarah asked. Then you fake it, Maria told her. Because if you do not, other people will control your story forever. Sarah thought about who she was 6 months ago, always letting Richard make the big decisions. That woman felt like a stranger now. I have been thinking, she said to Marcus, about why Victor's sons waited so long to come after us. Marcus looked at her. What is your theory? She continued. I think they had to be sure their father was never getting out of prison. His final appeal was denied 6 months ago. For the first time in 25 years, they know Victor will die behind bars. Maria nodded, which means they can finally plan to take over his empire. But only if they get rid of any other heirs first, Sarah finished, placing a hand on her stomach. Me and any children I might have. This was always going to happen. Richard just gave them an easy way to start. So stopping Richard does not stop the real threat, Marcus said. No, Sarah replied. But exposing the real threat stops Richard. Marcus smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. You know, you have stopped thinking like you are being hunted. You are starting to think like a hunter. Sarah realized he was right. She had changed from prey into a predator. Is that a good thing? She asked. It is survival, he said. And it is what will keep you and your baby safe. Promise me something, Sarah said, her voice firm. Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, we will not let fear make our decisions anymore. Marcus took her hand. I promise. But you have to promise me something too. If this gets too dangerous, you will let me get you and the baby somewhere safe. Sarah saw the same protective look in his eyes, that must have been in their mothers. I promise our baby will always be my first priority, but I will not hide while others fight my battles. Those days are over. He accepted that. The next morning was cold and gray. In the mirror, Sarah wondered if the woman looking back was brave enough for what was next. At 8 months pregnant, she felt the weight of the world, but she also saw new determination in her eyes. The press conference was set for 10 a.m. The room was already filled with cameras, microphones, and a lot of security. "You do not have to do this," Marcus said, for the 10th time. "We can still call it off." Sarah shook her head. "No, I am done letting other people decide my future." Just then, Maria Santos appeared in the doorway, holding a tablet. She had an expression that meant trouble. "We just heard from the FBI," she announced. "Victor's sons made contact. They want to make a deal." Sarah's heart started pounding. "A deal for what?" "They are offering to leave you alone for good," Maria explained. "In exchange, you make a public statement giving up any claim to Victor Blackstone's money, and you agree to never look into your mother's death." "Absolutely not," Marcus said instantly. But Sarah held up a hand. "It is not his decision." "They promise no more surveillance," Maria continued. "No more threats. They will not interfere with your divorce, and they guarantee your child will never be contacted." "And all I have to do is give up my right to know how my mother died?" Sarah asked. "And any inheritance from a man I do not even know?" Maria confirmed that was the deal. Sarah felt a hot surge of anger. They wanted her to choose fear and ignorance, just like her mother was forced to. They wanted her to pass that same legacy of silence down to her own child. "Sarah, you need to think about this," Marcus urged. "This offer could mean safety for you and the baby." "This offer," she shot back, "is exactly why our family is in this mess." Maria spoke carefully. "The FBI thinks this means they are more scared of being exposed than we thought. They would not be offering a deal if they were not worried." That was all Sarah needed to hear. Her decision was instant and clear. "I am not taking their deal. I am not trading the truth for a promise from men who terrorize people. And I will not teach my child that you handle bullies by giving them what they want." Before anyone could argue, there was a knock. Helen, Marcus's assistant, looked flustered. "Miss Mitchell, there is someone here to see you. He says he is your stepfather, Tom." Sarah's heart leaped. "Is he safe?" "He is with FBI agents, but he wants to speak with you alone before you go out there." Tom Wheeler looked older, with new lines of stress around his eyes. But when he saw Sarah, he broke into the same warm smile that had comforted her for years. "Sarah, sweetheart, you look beautiful." She hugged him gently. "Tom, I was so worried. Are you okay?" "I am safe now," he said. "But I needed to see you. I have to tell you some things that might change your mind about all this." He handed her a thick envelope. "Things I should have told you a long time ago." Inside were photos of her mother she had never seen. In one, a young, laughing Maria Blackstone stood beside a man Sarah did not recognize. "Who is this?" she asked. "That is your mother, with Detective James Morrison," Tom said quietly. He was the police officer investigating Victor's crimes back then. He was the one who helped her escape. "He was killed in what police called a robbery gone wrong," Tom explained. "Shot 3 times, case closed." But Maria never believed it was random. She was certain Victor had him killed. A coldness spread through Sarah's chest. Tom then pulled out another document with an official letterhead. "This is Detective Morrison's final report on Victor's organization. He was planning to present it to a federal grand jury the week he died." Sarah scanned the report, seeing terms like money laundering and drug trafficking. "Tom, why are you showing me this now?" "Because Detective Morrison had a partner. For 25 years, she has carried on his investigation. Agent Patricia Collins. She is now a senior FBI investigator, and she is downstairs. She has been waiting all this time for someone from your family to help her finish what Morrison started. Sarah realized she was trembling. So, telling my story is not just about me, Sarah said. It is about getting justice for Detective Morrison. I am saying your mother would be proud of the woman you have become, Tom answered. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is also the most necessary. Sarah looked at the photos again, seeing her mother not as a victim, but as a fighter. Tom, she said, I need you to tell me the truth. Do you think Mom's car accident was really an accident? Tom was quiet for a long moment, his face heavy with 25 years of guilt. No, sweetheart, I do not. I think your mother was murdered because she refused to stop fighting for her children. The words hit Sarah like a punch, but instead of breaking her, they forged her resolve into something unbreakable. Then it is time to finish what she started. Sarah stood up, placed her hand on her belly, and looked at Tom. Let's go tell the world what happens when you underestimate a Blackstone woman. The conference room was packed with reporters, federal agents, and law enforcement officials. Sarah stood at the podium and felt a strange calm wash over her. Good morning, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. My name is Sarah Wheeler Mitchell. 6 months ago, I thought I knew who I was. I thought I was a former elementary school teacher, married to a successful attorney, and expecting my first child. She paused, letting her words settle. Today, I am here to tell you what I have learned about the difference between the life you think you are living and the life that is actually happening around you. I am here to talk about systematic deception, financial manipulation, and the way women are often treated as assets instead of people. Sarah looked directly into the camera, thinking of all the women who might recognize their own stories in hers. But mostly, I am here to talk about what happens when you stop letting other people tell your story for you. So she decided to tell her story herself. Over the next 30 minutes, she laid out the entire narrative at a press conference. She detailed Richard's systematic manipulation, her connection to Marcus, the criminal organization, and the web of lies that had defined her adult life. I am not here asking for pity, she said at the end. I am here as a woman who found out the people she trusted most had been lying to her. And I chose to fight back. The results were immediate. Within 48 hours, Richard's law firm had fired him, and the competency case against Sarah was withdrawn. His attorney quickly filed for an uncontested divorce with minimal financial demands. He is trying to minimize his exposure, Maria explained. He cannot afford to have his tactics examined in court, now that they are public record. As for the threats from Victor's sons, they stopped. All the new attention on their activities had made things too risky. Sarah felt a strange combination of relief and anticlimax. So, it is over? The immediate threats are neutralized, Marcus said, entering with a thick folder. But there is more. The FBI's investigation has uncovered enough evidence for federal charges against 12 people in Victor's organization, including his sons. They can now close cases that have been open for decades, including the murder of a detective. They found financial records showing payments from Victor's accounts to the man who killed him. Sarah felt tears welling up. Mom was right. She was murdered for trying to protect us. She was murdered for refusing to let violent men control her family, Marcus corrected gently. And because she fought back, we now have the proof to make sure they all face justice. Victor would die in prison anyway, but now his legacy would be federal convictions, not myths, about his hidden fortune. Thinking of the mother who had died to save her, Sarah knew what she needed to do. I want to start a foundation, she said suddenly, something that helps women escape manipulative relationships. I want to create a foundation, Sarah declared, one that provides legal support for people trying to uncover family secrets that threaten their safety. Marcus smiled. How much money are you thinking? Whatever it takes, she replied. I want to use my inheritance and whatever I get from Richard's schemes to turn this nightmare into something good, something that helps other people. What would you call it? Sarah thought of her mother's strength and the detective's dedication. The Maria Morrison Foundation, she said, for truth, for justice, and for the idea that no one should have to choose between their safety and their family. 6 weeks later, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She named her Maria Rose Mitchell Blackstone, honoring both her mother and her newfound family. Marcus was in the delivery room, crying harder than the baby. She is perfect, he whispered, holding his tiny niece with awe. She is a Blackstone, Sarah said, tired but filled with joy. She is going to change the world. The Foundation's first meeting was held in the same conference room where Sarah had first shared her story. 30 women, all survivors of domestic manipulation, gathered to support one another. I used to think family was something that just happened to you, Sarah told the group, as little Maria slept in her carrier nearby. But I have learned that real family is something you choose, something you build, and something you fight for. And sometimes the family you choose is much stronger than the one you were born into. The women nodded, seeing their own stories reflected in her words. We are here because we refuse to let other people's twisted ideas of love define us, she continued. We are here because we chose truth over comfort and our own voices over silence. Sarah looked at the faces in the room, each one a testament to incredible courage. The most important thing I have learned, she said, her voice steady and clear, is that healing happens in a community. We do not get over trauma by ourselves. We heal by telling our stories, by supporting one another, and by refusing to believe we deserve anything less than complete honesty. After the meeting, Sarah stood in Marcus's office, looking out at the city, feeling a sense of peace she had never thought possible. Sarah gazed out at the city, her new home. Little Maria was already showing her Blackstone green eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Do you regret any of it? Marcus asked, joining her by the window. He meant going public, taking the risk, choosing truth. Sarah thought about the night Richard had slapped her. The same night she discovered Marcus was her brother. I regret waiting 37 years to see I had choices, she finally said. I hate that Mom died believing she had to keep us apart. And I hate knowing women are still living the life I had 6 months ago, trapped and afraid. But not the fight itself? He asked. No, she said. The fight was the most honest thing I had done in years. What is our next move? Sarah looked down at her sleeping daughter. We keep telling the truth. We help other women find their strength, and we build the family our mother always dreamed of. Sounds like a legacy, Marcus said softly. Sarah put her hand on the window, feeling perfectly in place for the very first time. A year later, Sarah found herself in the very same Manhattan restaurant that had once shattered her world. But tonight was different. She was hosting the first fundraiser for the Maria Morrison Foundation. The room was full of supporters who had helped build something beautiful from the ruins of her past. It feels different being here, Marcus said, watching the spring rain with her. Everything is different, Sarah replied, adjusting 10-month-old Maria on her hip. Her daughter reached for everything, with a fearless curiosity that was just like her grandmother. But it is a good different, an honest one. The evening was filled with moving stories from women the foundation had helped and updates on the federal cases that followed Sarah's testimony. For Sarah, though, the most important moment arrived with Agent Patricia Collins. During the event, an FBI investigator approached Sarah. Miss Mitchell, I had to thank you in person, she said, her voice full of respect. Because you were brave enough to speak up, we finally closed Detective Morrison's case after 25 long years. His family can finally have peace. The agent confirmed their suspicions. While they could not directly prove Victor ordered the murder, they had enough to convict his men and trace the money back to his organization. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. Her mother's fear had been real. The agent nodded kindly. Your mother was a hero, trying to protect you from a brutal world, but she fought that battle alone. Sarah realized the difference. She had her brother Marcus, who provided safety and resources, and she lived in a time when a woman's voice was more likely to be heard. She thought about how easily her story could have ended in tragedy. Did we really stop them? She asked. Victor's sons, their entire network? We've hit them hard, Agent Collins confirmed. 3 of Victor's sons are behind bars, and the rest are either arrested or on the run. The agent's smile was grim. But crime is like a hydra. You cut off one head, another grows back. The real victory was sending a message that targeting families has serious consequences. What about Richard? Sarah asked. He's serving 18 months for financial fraud. He'll lose his license and his money, but he will get out. The agent added, the real question is what he will be like then. Sarah said firmly, that is not my problem anymore. Later, Sarah spoke with other women whose stories echoed her own. A psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, observed, it is amazing how these abusers all follow the same script. The intense affection at the beginning, the slow destruction of your confidence. Then they cut you off from everyone you know, added Jennifer Chen, a lawyer. Sarah, thinking of Richard's cold and calculated methods, agreed. They are all reading from the same playbook. It works because it preys on our need for love and safety. Dr. Martinez looked at her. That is why your foundation is so important. Every woman who hears your story sees a piece of her own. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of fellow survivors. I have been thinking a lot about the difference between justice and healing, she told the group. I thought getting justice would heal me, but I have learned they are 2 separate things. Justice came when Richard was sentenced and Victor's network was broken, but healing only began when she started telling her own story, reclaiming her self-worth, and building something positive from the wreckage. Healing is something you control, while justice depends on others, Dr. Martinez agreed. Sarah nodded. Exactly. Too many of us wait for justice to start healing, which just gives our abusers more power. She glanced over at her brother Marcus, who was talking with donors. He was still her protector, but he had learned to trust her to make her own choices. She realized that family is not about blood, but about people who show up for you and support you. As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself standing on the very spot where Richard had struck her 13 months ago. The memory was sharp, but the pain was gone. Thinking about that night? Marcus asked, appearing at her side with a sleeping Maria in his arms. I am thinking about how much has changed. That night, I felt trapped. Tonight, I feel like I am right where I belong. Any advice for the woman you were back then? Marcus asked. Sarah thought for a moment. I would tell her that the slap was not the worst thing that happened. The worst thing was all the years she let him treat her like she was less, and convinced herself it was normal. And the best thing? He asked. The best thing was that the slap finally made her angry enough to demand better. Marcus smiled. Mom would be proud. I think so too, Sarah said. But more importantly, I am proud of myself. We chose truth, we fought back, and we built something good from the rubble. She took her sleeping daughter from his arms, filled with a powerful love. What do you want for her? Marcus asked. Nodding toward Maria, I want her to know her own value. I want her to know that real love makes you feel stronger, not smaller. And I want her to know that she always has a choice. And if she ever faces what you did, he asked, then I want her to remember that her mother chose courage, that her uncle stood by her, and that our family's legacy is to fight back against anyone who uses love as a weapon. As they were leaving, their waiter approached, the same young man from that terrible night. "Miss Mitchell," he said with a warm smile, "I followed your story. Watching you that night gave me the courage to finally leave a bad situation I was in for years." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I am so glad you are safe." "I am," he said, "and I am applying to law school. I want to help people, just like your foundation helped me." After he left, Marcus shook his head in wonder. "You realize your story is changing lives you will never even know about, right?" Sarah looked down at her daughter. "That is the thing about truth," she said softly. "Once it is out, it grows and changes the world in ways you cannot predict." "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. Sarah thought of the quiet, simple life she could have had if she had just taken Richard's deal and disappeared. A safe life, but a small one, built on lies. "No regrets," she said. "Only gratitude. I am grateful I got the chance to become the person I was always meant to be." They walked out into the cool spring evening. Sarah had lost a marriage built on lies, but had gained a family built on truth. She had given up a false sense of security for real strength. She had learned that love was not a feeling, but a choice you make every single day. The rain had stopped, and the city lights sparkled around them. Sarah held her daughter close, her brother by her side, and walked toward a future she had built herself. She had come full circle, but this time, the circle was stronger, wider, and forged in a truth that could survive any storm. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.